The moment I closed my eyes that night, I felt the kind of exhaustion that isn't just from the body, it was a weariness of the soul. The kind that comes after you've tried to stay strong for too long. I remember whispering, almost absent-mindedly, "Lord, I just need peace tonight." And somewhere between that whisper and the drifting of sleep, I found myself standing in a place I didn't recognize, yet it felt strangely safe. The air was still, filled with a light that didn't come from the sun, and a warmth that felt alive, almost breathing. I could hear faint sounds, like distant echoes of children laughing, but fading as if joy itself was leaving the earth. I turned around slowly, my feet touching soft grass that glowed faintly beneath me, and that's when I saw him. The figure I've seen before, the one who radiates love so deep that every fear vanishes, but this time something was different. His robe was still white, but it carried a weight, like the light itself was dimming around him. His shoulders slumped, his head slightly bowed, and as he lifted his face toward me, I froze. There were tears in his eyes, real, heavy tears that shimmered like drops of light breaking apart in sorrow. They rolled down his cheeks in silence, and each one that fell seemed to tremble the ground beneath us. I felt my knees weaken, my breath catch in my throat, because never in all my dreams, never in all my prayers had I imagined seeing him weep. I wanted to run to him, to fall at his feet, to say, "Why are you crying?" But the words wouldn't come out. My voice felt trapped in my chest, as if the air itself didn't want to disturb the holiness of that moment. He looked at me, not with anger, not even with disappointment, but with a sorrow so deep it pierced through every wall I had built around my heart. His eyes carried 1,000 untold stories, as if he had seen every broken home, every starving child, every act of cruelty, and still loved through it all. That love was there shining through the sadness, but it hurt to look at it. It was love mixed with grief, like the heart of heaven was mourning something precious it had lost. I could feel the weight of that pain settling around me, pressing against my chest, and for the first time in my life, I felt the heartbreak of God. He took one slow step forward, and the grass beneath his feet glowed brighter, as if creation itself still adored him. I could see the marks on his hands, old wounds that still glimmered faintly with light. He reached one hand toward me, and even before I could touch him, warmth flooded through my soul, melting every fear, every doubt, every layer of pride I didn't even know I had. His hand trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from grief. It was the trembling of someone who had seen too much suffering, too much distance between what he gave and what we've become. There was no thunder, no voice from heaven, no lightning or sound of trumpets, only that sacred silence between us, the kind of silence that speaks louder than words ever could. I could feel the air pulsing with meaning, like creation was holding its breath, waiting for me to understand. His lips moved slightly, but the words were whispers carried on the wind, not meant for the ears, but for the soul. His tears fell again, landing softly on the ground, and where they touched, the grass turned a brighter shade of green, as if even his sorrow gave life. I wanted to tell him how sorry I was for everything humanity had done, for everything I had done, for every moment we chose noise over prayer, pride over compassion, distraction over love. But I couldn't speak. My tears began to fall too, and for a moment it felt like heaven and earth were weeping together. As his hand reached toward me, the scene around us began to shift, as though the light that held the dream together was being pulled apart and woven into something new. The soft golden field started to dim, its glow fading into gray mist, and I felt a slow, gentle tug at the center of my being, as if he was inviting me to see what he saw. The air grew colder, heavier, filled with the faint cries of voices I couldn't place. Then, through the mist, images began to form. I stood beside him, though I wasn't sure if I was standing at all. Before us appeared a city, a vast, restless place with lights flashing, horns blaring, and people moving without looking up. Crowds rushed past one another, their faces blank, their eyes fixed on glowing screens that reflected pale blue light against their tired skin. I watched as mothers walked with children, never once looking at them, and men shouted into phones, their tempers short, their hearts somewhere else. Then he pointed toward a street corner where a homeless man sat trembling in the cold, clutching a torn blanket. Thousands passed him, not one stopping, not even glancing his way. His eyes lifted for just a moment, and I could feel his silent prayer for someone to notice. But no one did, and when I looked back at him, tears were sliding down his face again, as if that single ignored soul carried the weight of the world. The vision shifted once more, and suddenly I was standing inside a home filled with noise but no warmth. A family sat together around a table, but no one spoke. Their faces were illuminated only by the cold light of their phones, laughter replaced by silence, togetherness replaced by absence. The walls echoed with emptiness. The mist swirled again, and I was pulled to another place, this time a war zone. Smoke rose in the distance. The sound of explosions thundered faintly, and children ran through rubble searching for their mothers. I saw soldiers kneeling beside wounded friends, crying out for help that wouldn't come. I wanted to look away, but he gently turned my face back toward it, and I understood that he wasn't showing me to punish, but to awaken. His tears weren't just for the victims. They were for the hearts that had grown numb to pain, for the people who scrolled past suffering like it was nothing but noise on a screen. Then came a different scene. A church grand and beautiful, filled with people dressed in their best, singing hymns with raised hands. It looked holy, yet there was something missing. The songs were loud, the smiles wide, but the light of love was dim. I felt a heaviness there, a hollowness beneath the beauty. And I saw him standing at the back, unrecognized, unseen, as though the very one they worship was no longer welcome in his own house. His tears fell again, and this time I felt the sorrow echo through every corner of my heart. The images came faster then, forests burning, oceans filled with plastic, children crying for food while others wasted theirs, people turning on one another over things that never mattered. I could feel the heartbeat of creation, heavy and uneven, like it was struggling to breathe. Through it all, his presence remained beside me, silent but overflowing with compassion. I understood without words that he wasn't angry. He was heartbroken. Heartbroken at how far we had drifted from love, how easily we forgot the faces of those we were meant to care for, how we built walls higher than bridges. I looked at him again, at those tear-streaked cheeks, and I could feel his pain become my own, like a mirror reflecting the sorrow of heaven back into my fragile human heart. As the visions faded, the mist slowly dissolved, and the soft golden light began to return. I stood there trembling, unable to speak, while he remained silent beside me. There was no anger in his face, only a quiet sadness that seemed to carry the weight of the entire world. I wanted to ask what the meaning of all this was, but before my lips could form the words, I felt the answer move through me like a whisper inside my spirit. The meaning wasn't hidden in words, it was written in the sorrow of his eyes. His tears were not for himself, they were for us. Each drop that fell was a reflection of humanity's forgotten compassion, every tear a prayer unspoken for those who no longer knew how to love. It was as though heaven itself was mourning the distance between creator and creation, not because of rebellion alone, but because of indifference. I realized then that his tears were not a sign of defeat, but of divine heartbreak, a love so vast that it grieves when we close our hearts to it. The pain in his eyes wasn't anger at sinners, but sorrow for children who have lost their way, for souls chasing shadows instead of light, for a world that no longer listens to the whisper of conscience. His tears spoke of wars born from pride, of children growing up without kindness, of faith that has turned into performance rather than relationship. It was not just the evil that broke his heart, but the absence of tenderness, the silence of compassion, the fading of empathy in a world that once reflected his love. I felt him look deeper into me, past every mask I had ever worn, past my words, my faith, my doubts, into the core of who I was. I felt exposed not because of guilt, but because of how clearly he saw everything, my fear, my selfishness, my business, my excuses. And instead of condemnation, there was only love, deep and sorrowful love. It was the kind of love that doesn't scold you for falling, but weeps with you because you forgot how to get back up. That's when I began to understand the meaning behind his tears. They weren't about punishment or prophecy. They were about longing, a longing for hearts to turn back, for love to be restored, for us to remember that he is not far away. That heaven weeps when we forget how to care for one another. His tears told the story of a Savior who still stands among us, not on a throne of gold, but in the quiet suffering of those who are unseen, in the pain of the lonely, in the hunger of the poor, in the confusion of those searching for truth. Every tear seemed to echo the cry of love that still reaches out through time, whispering that there is still hope if only we would open our eyes. The message wasn't complicated or hidden in mystery. It was heartbreak in its purest form, the pain of love unreturned. His tears revealed the tenderness of God, the compassion that doesn't grow tired even when the world grows cold. I felt a deep ache rising within me, one that wasn't mine alone but shared with him. It was as though I could feel the pulse of his heart, beating for the brokenness of the world, aching for the restoration of what was lost. And in that moment, I realized his tears were not just sorrow, they were also an invitation for us to see as he sees, to feel as he feels, to love as he loves, even in a world that has forgotten how. When I finally woke from that dream, my pillow was damp with tears. For a moment, I couldn't tell if I was still asleep or awake because the emotion that filled the room was so thick, so real, it lingered like mist. My chest ached, my breath came shallow, and for a long while I couldn't move. His face, his trembling hand, those sorrowful eyes, they were all still there behind my eyelids, alive and unshakable. I sat up in the dim light of dawn, feeling a strange quietness wrap around me, not the kind that comforts, but the kind that humbles you to silence. Everything in me felt exposed, raw and yet renewed. It wasn't the same kind of awakening I'd felt after other dreams or prayers. This time, something had broken inside of me, a wall I didn't even know I'd built. I started to realize that his tears had washed something away in me. The pride that whispered, "I'm doing enough." The self-centeredness that made faith feel like a checklist instead of a heartbeat. The numbness that made me scroll past suffering as if it were someone else's problem. All of it began to crumble piece by piece, leaving me with a vulnerability I hadn't felt in years. I felt smaller, but somehow truer. It was as if his sorrow had awakened a forgotten tenderness in me, a compassion that had been buried under the noise of daily life. I couldn't stop thinking about the faces he showed me. The homeless man ignored by the crowd, the family disconnected by their screens, the children running through rubble. They weren't just visions anymore, they had become part of me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw them, and every time I opened them, I saw reflections of them in the real world around me. For days I couldn't carry on like before. I'd walk past strangers and wonder about their stories, their pain, their hidden tears. The world didn't look the same anymore. The laughter on the streets felt fragile, the noise of life felt hollow, and I realized how blind I had been to the quiet suffering in others. I began to pray again, but not out of routine, out of desperation. I prayed for the world, for the people I'd never met, for those who had forgotten how to hope. And in those prayers, I could almost hear his voice again, not as sound, But as a stillness that filled the spaces between words, the dream became my turning point. I started seeking simplicity again, less of me, more of him. I turned off the noise, sat in silence, and began to listen. I found myself being more patient, more forgiving, more aware. His tears had become my mirror, showing me how far I had drifted from love's center. It wasn't about religion or perfection. It was about remembering the heart of what it all means to care, to forgive, to see. Every act of kindness, no matter how small, began to feel sacred. Every moment of love felt like a way to dry one of his tears. I found myself reaching out to people I had forgotten, forgiving those I had quietly held bitterness against, and showing gentleness in places where before I had been indifferent. It was as though he had handed me his own heart and whispered, "Carry this carefully." And that's what I tried to do, to walk through the world a little softer, a little slower, a little more aware that love is not something to speak of, but something to live. His sadness became my strength, his heartbreak became my calling, and his tears became the water that helped something new grow inside of me. The more I reflected on that dream, the more I understood that it wasn't just a personal encounter meant to comfort me. It was a message meant to awaken all of us. His tears weren't only for my sins or my indifference, they were for a world that has forgotten how to love deeply, purely, and unconditionally. The weight I felt wasn't mine alone, it was a collective sorrow, a glimpse of how heaven feels when we turn our hearts away from one another. I realized that his tears were calling for something greater than emotion. They were calling for a return, a revival of the kind of love that can heal nations, families, and souls. He wasn't weeping because the world was lost beyond hope. He was weeping because there is still hope, but too few of us are carrying it forward. The message was clear. We have become so busy trying to live that we have forgotten how to truly be alive. We have built towers of distraction, drowning our spirits in noise, forgetting that love was always meant to be our language, our foundation, our way of seeing one another. His tears were like a plea echoing through eternity, asking us to remember what we were created for. Not wealth, not fame, not comfort, but compassion. The dream became a mirror for humanity, showing how far we've drifted from the heart of what he taught. To love our neighbors, to forgive those who hurt us, to lift up the broken instead of stepping over them. I could feel his sorrow turning into urgency in my spirit. It was as if he was saying, "The time to love is now. The world is trembling with pain, wars, hatred, loneliness, division, and all the while, we walk past each other like strangers." Yet even in the chaos, his message carried peace. Love is still the answer, still the bridge, still the power strong enough to turn tears into healing. We just need to remember it, to live it out, to let our faith become visible through kindness. It's not grand gestures he's asking for, but hearts that reflect his light in the smallest moments. The way we speak to others, the way we forgive, the way we see those who have been unseen. I felt that the dream was not meant to scare, but to stir. It was a divine wake-up call, a reminder that the Savior weeps not because he's lost control, but because he still believes in us enough to feel our pain. His tears are proof that love hasn't given up. They fall for every life that could still be changed, for every soul that could still come home, for every heart that could still learn to love again. It's an invitation for the world to pause, to return to tenderness, to let mercy rise again where anger has taken root. That night changed how I see everything. When I hear news of tragedy, I don't just sigh and move on, I stop and pray. When I see someone hurting, I don't just feel sorry, I try to show care. When I meet people who seem impossible to love, I remind myself that he loves them too. His tears taught me that love isn't weakness, it's the greatest strength we have. It's the only thing powerful enough to turn mourning into joy, division into unity, despair into hope. And though I can still see those tears in my mind, I also know they carry a promise that one day, if we choose love again, they will no longer need to fall.